and welcome to My Week in Baseball. I'm your host, Phil S. Truth Harrison. You're listening to Season 2, Episode 15. All episodes are available in both video and podcast format at myweekinbaseball.com or subscribe on YouTube at My Week in Baseball. As always, thank you to Rose Petal Studios for the artwork and logos created for this show and website. You'll find Rose Petal Studios on Instagram at rosepetal_studios. Also, thanks to Brunjo Productions in Nashville for our intro music. Learn more at brunjo.com. Well, today's episode includes an introduction to the 2023 World Series featuring the Rangers and Diamondbacks, and thoughts about how to consider the series in modern and historical terms. We'll also talk about Gold Gloves and baseball's best defenders, and Reggie Jackson versus Kyle Schwarber in postseason home runs. Not to mention a blast from the past featuring a former World Series winner. Of course, we'll also have a trivia teaser and a timely limerick, our baseball limerick, along the way. So let's get right to it. Okay, today we start with the trivia teaser. This year's Arizona Diamondbacks for 2023 are going to the World Series with 84 wins, placing them at just 6 games above 500 for the regular season. The question is, what previous World Series winner actually had less wins during the regular season? Hint, they were a division winner and not a wild card, but it did happen during the wild card era. We'll have the answer later in the show. Okay, let's talk about the World Series. 2 wild cards are in, and who are they? We have the Texas Rangers, who won 90 wins. They tied for first place in the American League West Division with 90 wins. They tied with Houston, but they lost the tiebreaker to finish in second place. Still, 90 wins is respectable. The Arizona Diamondbacks had just 84 wins and would not have made my modified playoffs this season. So I'll ask you to listen to the previous episode 14 of season 2, to find out the details. But in my version of the playoffs, the Diamondbacks are out and the Seattle Mariners are in. Anyway, let's find out a little bit more about these 2 teams. I'm recording this on Thursday, October 26, 2023, and the World Series begins tomorrow on Friday, October 27. But do you really know who they are? We don't have any big city teams here. We don't have the Yankees. We don't have the Red Sox. We don't have the Mets. We don't have the Dodgers. We don't have some of those big market teams that you often expect, which in a way makes it exciting. It's different. You know, we've got some teams that often don't make it. But do you know who they are? Who are the Diamondbacks? Do you know who's on the team? How about the Rangers? Do you really know who's on the team? Anyway, we're going to look a little bit more at that. I have a feeling, I'm going to start with the Rangers. I have a feeling you might know them a little bit better because they have spent some more money in recent times. Just a couple of seasons ago that the Rangers made a big splash. They were expected to sign a free agent shortstop, and they ended up signing two big name, at that time, free agent shortstops. One, Corey Seager, who had played with the Dodgers, and the other, Marcus Semien, who had played with the A's, and then more recently with the Toronto Blue Jays. But they were both shortstops at the time, and Semien moved to second base, and they have been terrific for the Rangers. So you may have heard about that because that was a big free agent splash, especially, I think, Corey Seager. Semien may be a little bit more under the radar, but a terrific player. And this year, they've really coalesced together around the rest of the team. Now, the other reason that I think you may have know a little bit more about the Rangers is that they did sign pitcher Max Scherzer, who, of course, is a multiple Cy Young Award winner and pitched for the championship Washington Nationals just a few seasons ago. I believe that was 2019 without looking it up. So he's another signing they got at the trade deadline, another guy that I'm sure you've heard of, and maybe a reason that you know a little bit more about the Rangers than I think you're going to know about the Diamondbacks. But let's talk about that Rangers team right now. They've got some really good players, some of whom you may not know too much about. I'm going to start, I'm looking at baseballreference.com, and I'm just going to go kind of in order with the positions of the players they're talking about. So their starting catcher is Jonah Heim, who is a switch hitter, and he's been quite good the last 2 seasons. My understanding is he's a terrific defender, and his offense, especially for a catcher, is quite solid. He played in 131 games at age 28. For a catcher, that's a good chunk of the year. 28 doubles, 18 home runs in more limited play, 501 plate appearances. He batted .258. That's not bad for a catcher. .317 on base percentage. Again, pretty good. And he, with his slugging, he ended up with an OPS plus of 103, so 3% above the league average offensively. And with his defense, he certainly has been a great player for them. I'm actually going to mention the person considered their backup catcher, who is really their primary DH, Mitch Garver, but he is also a catcher. He came from the Minnesota Twins, and just a few seasons ago, he hit over 30 home runs. So he's been quite good. This year, he only played in 87 games, so he's part-time catcher, part-time designated hitter, but in those 87 games, he hit 19 home runs, 344 at-bats and 19 home runs, pretty good. A .270 batting average, .370 on base percentage. He walks quite a bit. And with his slugging, he has a OPS plus of 134, 34% above league average. So he's really the number 2 catcher. And the DH, 2 guys you probably don't know much about, but you put them together as, say, your starting catcher, we've got an all-star. We really have an all-star. You take Heim, especially with his defense, and the offense between he and Garver, you really have an all-star catcher. First base for them is Nate Lowe. I think, again, he's a little bit more under the radar. He's 27 years old. He is a homegrown player, and he had 17 home runs this year, which I think for first baseman, not especially impressive, but pretty good overall offensively, 11% above league average. His OPS is 775. 11% above league average. So really a good hitter, but kind of an under the radar guy. In fact, I'll take a quick look directly at Nate Lowe in his data. And he did play in 161 games this year, which is really remarkable. All but 1 game for the season. And his best year probably was a year ago, when he hit 27 home runs and he batted .302. But he's still a very good player at age 27. Nate Lowe, probably somebody you haven't heard about at first base. So I talked briefly about Marcus Semien. Marcus Semien has been a terrific hitter for the Rangers. Batted .276 this year, but 22% above league average. This is a second baseman. He had 40 doubles, 29 RBIs, 29 home runs, 100 RBIs, and he managed to score 122 runs. I think he was the leadoff hitter. I'd actually have to go dig into their lineups a little bit more, but he's been terrific for them, and he was terrific a couple of seasons ago. Maybe it's 3 seasons ago for the Oakland A's. He was terrific. A guy I hated to see the A's let go of. Corey Seager at shortstop. He had a fabulous season. Fabulous. I mean, I'm sure gosh, he would be an MVP candidate, except he's in the American League against Ohtani. He might finish second as an MVP, but this is their shortstop. Corey Seager came over from the Dodgers as a free agent. He hit 327, a really excellent batting average. He's 70% above league average, 70% above league average. So Corey Seager has had a stupendous season. He hit 42 doubles. And Seaman hit 40. Two guys on the team with more than 40 doubles. Wow. So this is Corey Seager, 33 home runs, 96 runs batted in. So he's been terrific as well. And then is he a rookie? Josh Young at third base. His brother actually plays for the Tigers in the minor leagues and might end up being the Tigers' third baseman soon, his younger brother. But Josh Young was their third baseman. I'm just going to take a quick look to see if he was technically a rookie. So yes, he technically was a rookie. He played last year, 102 plate appearances. I'm pretty certain the cutoff for that is 150 plate appearances. That would mean he still qualifies as a rookie this year. He probably would have won Rookie of the Year, but he did get hurt later in the year and was out for a while. So I think that's going to hurt him. But terrific stats as their primary third baseman, 515 plate appearances, 25 doubles, 23 home runs, batted 266, and his OPS plus 109, 9% above league average. But a terrific guy, 25 years old. I think he's going to be really good. I had him on my fantasy baseball team this year. If you're playing fantasy baseball, pick him. Pick him. He's going to be a good under the radar pick next year. You're probably going to be able to get him outside of the top 100 picks. And I think he is going to be a good one. So Josh Young at third base. And then they've got several different outfielders listed here. Some of that has changed because over time, some other guys have come into play. But their center fielder, Leody Taveras, had a solid season, just slightly below league average offensively at 97%. Good center fielder. Their right fielder, who, if you haven't heard of this guy, you need to hear of him. Adolis Garcia. Adolis Garcia is a terrific slugger. This is a guy that people should be paying attention to. Again, he was on my fantasy team. He's an under the radar kind of player. He's a younger, well, I'd say he's a younger player. He actually turned 30 this year. I think he's hitting his prime a little later. But Adolis Garcia had 39 homers, 107 RBIs, and 108 runs scored. He hit 245, which isn't too bad. Walked 65 times. He strikes out a ton. Some of these guys do. Struck out 175 times, but 23% above league average offensively, and I believe a pretty decent defender. He's their primary right fielder. And then in the playoffs, they've had a rookie who, again, you may not have heard of, Evan Carter, playing primarily left field for them. Now, he's a left-handed hitter. He only played in 23 games, but in those 23 games, in 62 at-bats, this is Evan Carter, the left fielder, in 62 at-bats, he hit 306 with 5 homers in 62 at-bats, and he's been doing well in the playoffs. So this feels to me like a really kind of under the radar team that is really quite good. And as I talk about it, it's funny because coming into this, I felt like, oh, I'm not sure how I feel about this World Series. But when I talk about these Rangers, this is a really good team. Let's take a look at the pitching just briefly. So who are the top pitchers? Surprisingly, it's Dane Dunning, who's 28 years old. Dane Dunning is not a big strikeout pitcher. He's not a big, like, top of the rotation kind of guy that you would normally think about. 7.9 strikeouts per 9, which actually historically is pretty good. But in recent years, if you're not striking out at least one guy per 9 per inning. If you're not, you should be striking out around 9 per 9, or even 10, or maybe even 11 per 9 these days, it seems like. Anyway, Dane Dunning is a bit more of a pitch to contact guy, but he led the team in innings with 172 over 26 starts, and he pitched in 35 games, so he had some relief appearances as well. 12 wins, 7 losses, 3.70 ERA, a very solid player. He was really their primary starter during the season. Now, Nathan Eovaldi, who pitched less innings, Nathan Eovaldi is probably considered their ace. He pitched 144 innings, so not quite as many. 12 wins, 5 losses, a little bit better record than Dunning. His strikeout per 9 is 8.3, so a little bit better there, and his ERA 3.63. He's probably considered the ace of the staff, another bit of an under-the-radar guy, I think due to some injuries. And then a guy who I really like, and when I look at him, I think, how does nobody know about Jordan Montgomery? Jordan Montgomery came over at the trade deadline from the Yankees, and he's actually been quite good. He's 30 years old. He doesn't have a lot of decisions, and I think maybe he's not on average pitching deep enough into the games. He's more like a 5-inning guy, maybe 5 1/3, 5 2/3 most seasons. So I think he's maybe not gotten the decisions that other pitchers maybe historically got. He was only for the Rangers this year, because he came to the trade deadline, he played in just 11 games, started all 11, went 4 wins, 2 losses, 2.79 ERA, and 1.09 WHIP. So that means, just barely over a runner per inning getting on. He's surprisingly good. So we've got Nathan Eovaldi, Jordan Montgomery, Dane Dunning, and then you've got some other guys, experienced guys. You've got John Gray, who was actually pretty good, used to be on the Rockies, I believe, and I think part of his problem was being on the Rockies. Andrew Heaney, who has had his ups and downs, and they've got Martin Perez. Those are all guys who are kind of okay. But I think if you go with Jordan Montgomery, Nathan Eovaldi, Dane Dunning, whatever order you want to put them in, I actually kind of like Dunning, but most people would probably pick Nathan Eovaldi. And then on the closer side, they have Jose Leclerc, who had a 2.68 ERA, tossed 57 games, and finished in 24 of those games. Oh, he only had 4 saves, so he's really considered their setup guy, but I think he's the better pitcher. Will Smith, a lefty, had 22 saves, would probably be considered the actual closer, and his ERA was 4.40, so not nearly as impressive. Good whip, though. So we'll see. I don't know if their bullpen is up to the task. They seem kind of like a lot of more no-namey guys. I think Leclerc's the best guy, and looks like they're using him more in the 7th and 8th, which are likely the innings that are tougher, right? You've likely got guys on, so that might make sense. And then they do have Max Scherzer, who came over at the trade deadline from the Mets, was pretty good in the end of the regular season, which is really more what I'm focusing on right now than the playoff data. But during the regular season, Scherzer was 4 wins, 2 losses, 3.20 ERA, and 10.6 strikeouts per 9. So still at age 38, at least in the regular season, he was still pitching well. Anyway, I like these Rangers, and as I talk about them, I think this is a pretty exciting team, a little stronger in the hitting, I think, than the pitching, but pretty well-rounded. Let's take a quick look now at your Arizona Diamondbacks. I think you're going to know less about Arizona. I think I know less about Arizona. They, they won in the postseason. They won the National League wild card 2-0 over the Brewers. So that was just a best of 3 series. And then won 3-0 over the Dodgers, who seemed like the better team, but really didn't have the pitching when it came down to it in the playoffs. And then they surprisingly, in 7 games, they beat the Phillies. So I really thought the Phillies were going to do it. So that definitely is a surprise. Anyway, the Arizona Diamondbacks, who is on this team? Well, I'm going to start with the name that you should know if you don't know it already, and that is rookie, and I think he's certain to win the Rookie of the Year. This will be in the National League. Corbin Carroll's 22 years old, played in 155 games, 30 doubles, 10 triples, 25 homers, 76 runs batted in, and he scored 116 times. Batted .285, on base .362, and an OPS of .868, 34% better than league average. Oh, and by the way, I almost neglected to mention, this guy's fast. He stole 54 bases, caught stealing only 5 times. So this guy can wreak havoc on the bases. Corbin Carroll. So if you don't know that name, you should know that name. A certain Rookie of the Year. Wow. So I think the series could be worth watching for him. The rest of the Diamondbacks, they've got some decent players. Gabriel Moreno at catcher is a solid player, 4% above league average offensively. Again, if you get some good defense in there, that's a good catcher. Christian Walker, another under the radar guy at first base, but gosh, 36 doubles, 33 homers. He batted .258. Well, that's a nice batting average for a slugger, right? And 23% above league average. This is a good hitter. Christian Walker at first. Ketel Marte, the second baseman. He's a switch hitter. I know I've heard some people, my nephew in particular, really excited about him. 26 doubles, 25 home runs at second base. He's age 29 now, and I feel like he's really blossoming. He's a guy I've heard about quite a bit over the years. I keep hearing his name. I've always been kind of lukewarm on him, but gosh, he's having a great season and somebody I should not be overlooking. He scored 94 runs playing second base, batted .276, and 28% above league average for Ketel Marte. The shortstop, Geraldo Perdomo, he has been very good as well, a little less strong. Offensively, he's a switch hitter and just 4% below league average. So another solid performer at short. Third baseman, well, the Baseball Reference lists Emmanuel Rivera as the third baseman. Maybe played the most games there, but really right now, the primary third baseman is veteran Evan Longoria, who I don't know that has done particularly well offensively, but he's still considered the better defender. So Evan Longoria at third base just hit .223 during the regular season, but he has had a stellar long-term career. So good to have him on the team for that reason. We've got in the outfield, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., who had been on, I believe it was the Toronto Blue Jays, and has having a good year with 24 home runs, 35 doubles, and batted .261, 8% above league average. And then center fielder Alek Thomas, who's a bit below league average. I don't know much about him. Looks like more of a defensive play. Oh, they did also acquire Tommy Pham to be their designated hitter. Thinking they got him at the trade deadline as well. He's a guy you might know. Tommy Pham came over from the Mets, although he's been on quite a few teams. Started with St. Louis back in 2014. But for Arizona, he had .241 with 6 homers and 195 at bats. I think he's more of a DH type. He was above league average for the Mets. He's been a bit below league average for the Diamondbacks, but still a pretty good pickup at the trade deadline in Tommy Pham. So a quick look at the Arizona Diamondbacks starting rotation. We have now, this is a couple of names that you should know. You probably don't know them. Maybe you know Zach Gallen. He's their lead pitcher. He threw over 200 innings. So he's going to be He's going to be a top fantasy pick. You might have to pay too much for him next year. But 210 innings, 17 wins, 9 losses, 3.47 ERA, 9.4 strikeouts per 9, a whip of 1.12. Excellent. And their number 2 starting pitcher, Merrill Kelly. Merrill Kelly is older. He's 34, 12 wins, 8 losses, 3.29 ERA, 9.5 strikeouts per 9, 1.19, basically, almost the same whip. And then recently you've been seeing quite a bit of, I think I'll say his name right, Brandon Pfaadt, who is a rookie who has pitched quite well in the playoffs. At least he keeps his team in the game. During the regular season, he was only 3-9 with a 5.72 ERA. Whoo-wee. But I believe he's a guy who has kind of come around in the playoffs. So Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Brandon Pfaadt. They also have Ryan Nelson, but he didn't really pitch that well during the regular season. So, in the playoffs, you can get by sometimes with 3 or so starting pitchers. So we will see how that goes. And the other thing that I find interesting, and if you're a Mariners fan, you probably find this interesting, their closer was acquired from the Mariners at the trade deadline. Here was the interesting thing. The Mariners actually went on a winning string after that and nearly made the playoffs. The Diamondbacks, who started out strong, were kind of so-so toward the end of the year and squeaked in. But the closer from Seattle, Paul Sewald, was traded to Arizona at the trade deadline. So their closer is now Paul Sewald. He pitched finished 16 games with 13 saves. I'd have to look up how many save opportunities he actually had. Probably 16, probably 13 for 16. And his ERA was 3.57, but he does strike out 10.2 per 9 innings. So he does have a good strikeout ratio. His whip is high, though, at least for Arizona. It was 1.47. That's a lot. That's almost a guy and a half per inning on base. So he's walking over 5.1 guys per 9 for Arizona. That's a lot of walks. So good strikeout guy, a lot of walks. Can get you out of the game, but might put you on edge a little bit. But that's Paul Sewald. I'm trying to look at other guys here who pitched some innings for them. Their top innings eater was Scott McGough, 4.73 ERA, though, 70 innings pitched, 11 strikeouts per 9. But he definitely is a strikeout guy. And then actually the guy who's probably better than that pitched a few less innings, Kevin Ginkel. Kevin Ginkel was 9 wins and 1 loss. And he only had 4 saves, but I think the thing is, they're not putting him in those save situations very often. He has 9.6 strikeout per 9. He's quite good. And then they've got Miguel Castro, who can strike out a few guys, 8.4 strikeouts per 9. And they also list Kyle Nelson, mediocre ERA, a little over 4, but 10.8 strikeouts per 9. So again, I don't know if this is names you're really going to know. Ginkel, I think, really is the best reliever, but the closer is Paul Sewald. So for me, this team, what I'm looking here for the Rangers, I'm looking at the hitting. For the Arizona Diamondbacks, I think I'm looking at Corbin Carroll. And then I'm really paying attention to Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly, the 2 pitchers. I think that's the thing. Those are the things that I'm finding most interesting, and probably Ketel Marte, maybe Christian Walker at first base. Anyway, those are your 2 teams for the World Series. Hope you watch that, pay attention to it. And then we're going to our next topic. And this topic is something to honk about. So what am I going to honk about? Really, it's about the World Series. So I just talked through the 2 teams playing this year. And yeah, there's some excitement in my voice because there are definitely some fun players to watch. But this may be controversial, but to me, I want to think about this in maybe 2 different ways. And that is, I love the regular season. I love the 162 games, although it could be a little less. I could go back to 154 maybe. Um, I like the regular season, and I really enjoy rooting for my favorite teams to do well over that longer season, because you do need more starting pitching. You do need more depth. You need some guys who can come off the bench and play. You need some everyday players who you can rely on day after day. In the playoffs, it's not quite that way. You can get by with 3 starting pitchers and maybe even 2 if you've got a deep bullpen. So I feel differently about that. So to me, I can kind of say, root for your team during the regular season and hope they make the playoffs. But think about the playoffs as a separate entity. Think about the playoffs as more an end of year tournament. It's an end of year tournament. You have the regular season, then you have a tournament. And the reason I say that is, to me, the term World Series has changed over time, and it's a good marketing ploy, right? Well, best team in the world. Well, we'll talk just a bit more about that in a minute. But I like thinking about it as a tournament. You could think about it. I grew up in the Midwest, and so at the time, at least, I was a Big Ten fan. You could think about it like the end of season Big Ten tournament that they might have in basketball. But something like that, it's like, whoa, what happened? You'd like to win the tournament? Sure. But is it the most important thing? For some people, yeah. For some people, having the title of World Series champion really matters. I think it's also good, though, to focus on what happens in the regular season and really appreciate those teams like the Atlanta Braves, who had a terrific season. And that should be another episode, because the Braves were arguably one of the best teams of all time this year. They had a terrific offense. I don't have that on my schedule to talk about today, but they would be a good topic. They didn't make the World Series. You know what? So what? They're a terrific team. What a fun team to follow. Now we've got the tournament. And let me explain why I say that, because until up through the late 60s, up through 1968, we had the 2 leagues, American and National League, completely separate, other than they played maybe in spring training, they played in the All-Star game. Completely separate leagues. And then what would happen is the winner of each league, 1 team each, would go directly to the World Series, no playoffs. Was that a world champion? Mostly. Yeah, I would say for the most part, it was. Yeah, baseball's going on in other parts of the world too, but especially in the earlier years, less so. And most of the time, you're getting the 2 best teams. And maybe once in a while, one of the leagues had 2 teams that were slightly better than the winner in the other league. But most of the time, you're getting the 2 best leagues. You're certainly getting the best team in each league facing each other. And then you could be an AL fan. You could be an NL fan. And to me, I would call that truly a World Series, or as close as we were going to get at that time period. Coming in at the late 60s and starting in 1969, we had divisional play, which originally was 2 divisions in the American League, 2 divisions in the National League. So you did have 1 round of playoffs and then the World Series. And again, most of the time you got the best team, or certainly one of the very best teams that would make it to the World Series during those time periods. Again, occasionally you're going to have a second place team in one division will be better than another team. So total now 4 teams making the playoffs. Originally 2, right? 1 from each league. And then we go to the original divisions, then you've got 4. So it dilutes it a little, but still more or less a World Series. Then in 1973, the designated hitter comes to the American League, which of course changed the rules. So now we have 2 different leagues that still don't play each other, not during the regular season, and now have a completely different set of rules. So again, sending their 2 champions to the World Series still seems pretty reasonable. Then in 1997, we have the first interleague play. The first 2 teams during the regular season playing each other across leagues. And that continues to grow into the present day. So we now have more interleague games than we ever did before. And starting last season, 2022, the designated hitter was added to the National League. So at this point now, you've got two leagues that are playing by the same rules. No designated hitters in both. And now they're playing each other throughout the regular season. As far as I know, we have the same strike zones now. One time we didn't. The lines between the leagues have really blurred. In my view, the only purpose of the leagues now, we have history. There is a reason for having it for history. But the only other real purpose is to arbitrarily group teams in different categories so that they can go through this series of playoffs and come to the World Series from two different leagues. I don't really think the leagues matter anymore. So what is the real World Series? I think the real World Series is the World Baseball Classic, the WBC. It happens every 3 to 4 seasons. It happened this year in 2023. You have teams from all around the world playing. It's truly world-based. A lot of those players are on major league teams. They go to their home countries and then play against each other. It's quite exciting. And this year, of course, Japan won with Shohei Ohtani and had that incredible face-off against Team USA, facing Mike Trout. I mean, wow. That was a lot of fun. That was a real World Series. So in my view, the WBC is the World Series. Should take place more often than every 3 years. I'm not sure if every year is right, and we got to find a better time for it somehow than during spring training. Maybe it's every 2 years or something. So it's a little bit more like the Summer Winter Olympics, 2 and 2. I don't know. But to me, World Baseball Classic, that is our World Series. And I would think about now, currently, don't complain that teams with lesser records made it, because as we'll find out in today's trivia answer, this does happen from time to time. I don't think we should really try to fix the playoffs. We could change the teams that get into the playoffs. But I think we need to think about it as two different things. There's the regular season, and that's cool. And then there's the postseason tournament, AKA World Series. That's fun too, but it's fun in a different way. And your team shouldn't have to win the World Series in order to be a great team. You should be able to be a great team by doing that in the regular season. Thank you, Atlanta Braves. Next up, Kyle Schwarber of the Philadelphia Phillies passes Reggie Jackson of the New York Yankees in home runs hit in a postseason. So Kyle Schwarber now, even though his Phillies did not make it to the World Series, but he played through several rounds of playoffs, he now has 20 career playoff home runs. Wow. Reggie Jackson has just 18. And when I first heard that, I'm like, oh, okay, Schwarber passed Reggie Jackson. He's got more home runs now. I thought, well, Schwarber plays in a lot more games, right? Because we have the expanded playoffs. There's a lot more rounds of playoffs. When Reggie played, that would have been, well, I guess he would have actually started when you were back without divisions. But a lot of his career, he was playing in that divisional era. So he wouldn't have played in nearly as many playoff games. And so I thought, well, that doesn't even seem fair. But then when I looked at the stats, and I'm going to say thank you here to statmuse.com for this data on Kyle Schwarber and Reggie Jackson. So I think this is actually pretty fascinating. When I look back at Reggie Jackson, he played on playoff teams for the Oakland A's in the early 70s. So yeah, these are all divisional teams, at least in the playoffs. And then into the late 70s and the early 80s on the Yankees. And then finally, near the end of his career, he played for what was then the California Angels, now the Anaheim Angels. But during his playoff career, he had a total of 77 games. That's roughly half a season, 281 at bats. And during that time, he hit 18 home runs and he batted 278. Okay, but it's really the 18 home runs I'm looking at, 281 at bats. And I thought, okay, I'm thinking, well, Schwarber's got way more at bats. He's played way more games. Of course, he's hit more home runs. That was my thought going into this. I look up Kyle Schwarber, less games, less at bats, more home runs. Wow. Kyle Schwarber's only 65 games, 212 at bats compared to Reggie's 281. So a fair number left, roughly 60 less at bats. 20 home runs compared to Reggie's 18. Now, Reggie did hit more doubles. Reggie had 14 doubles, and Schwarber doesn't hit many doubles, at least in the playoffs. He got 6 doubles. And Schwarber's a 245 career playoff hitter, 375 on base percentage. Reggie, 278 career hitter, 358 on base percentage. So actually, Schwarber has a better career playoff on base percentage, so he walks more frequently. But that made me feel better about it. I looked at it and thought, you know what? Schwarber has more home runs in less games and less at bats. So he's played for the Cubs in the early teens, and he was on that World Series Cubs team in 2016. He's also been on the Boston Red Sox in the playoffs and these last 2 seasons with the Philadelphia Phillies. So anyway, after looking it up, I felt better about it. And I say, you know what? That's a meaningful stat. And thank you, Kyle Schwarber, for clubbing some home runs. Next up, the Gold Glove. Well, recently, Major League Baseball issued some of the quote-unquote finalists for the Gold Glove, at least in the American League. And they're listing 3 people in each league for each position. And this one I just found amusing. They even list utility as a position. You've got your regular 9 positions and then utility. So who was the best fielder who kind of played all over the field? I guess so. I feel kind of iffy about that. One of the guys who made it, though, was Zach McKinstry of the Detroit Tigers. And the reason McKinstry is under the utility category is he does play all over the field. He played more than 20 games in each of these places. 2 outfield slots, right, and left field, more than 20 games. He also played more than 20 at shortstop, at third base, and at second base. So he really did move around the field, and good for him. I mean, if he wins the Gold Glove, that'd be great. I still feel like utility is maybe a little questionable to have a Gold Glove player for that. Anyhow, the reason I bring up the Gold Glove, and I'll probably mention this again in the future, is that we're putting up MLB. MLB is putting up 6 players, 3 from the NL, 3 from the AL. And as I just described, there's really no difference between the leagues anymore. There is no reason to have 2 different people, 1 in each league, each win a Gold Glove. How is that possible? How can we have 2 people be the best fielding second baseman? How can we have 2 people be the best first baseman? We can't. Major League Baseball can't have 2 people who are the best. So my proposal would be that we go and combine the leagues, because they really don't matter anymore, and we just take the top 3 finishers from each league and we award them 3 awards. You can win the bronze medal, 3rd place, the 3rd best fielder in baseball. You can win the silver medal, silver glove. Maybe it's bronze glove, silver glove, or you can win 1st place, the Gold Glove, the gold medal, as the best fielder at that position in Major League Baseball. And I think that, to me, seems more fair. Who are the 3 best fielders? And let's give them gold, silver, bronze. It used to be that this was all voted on. It's voted on, I believe it's by the managers and coaches from major league teams. You can't vote for anyone on your own team. It used to be 100% vote. It's not anymore. I think that's better. 25% of it, at least from what I could find, maybe one of you will correct me on this, but from what I could find, it looks like 25% is considered on stats and 75% is going to be on votes. And so the new stat they're using for that is called the Saber Defensive Index, the SDI, but it's supposed to tell how much better or worse you are at fielding compared to your peers. It says, and this is from Rawlings.com, because it's the Rawlings. They make the gloves, right? The Rawlings Gold Glove. It's a measure of the number of runs saved by a player's defensive performance compared to the average defensive player at that position. So that's the statistical part, and then you have the voting part, and the two of those go together to rank the players at the end. But I like that. I'm glad that it's not all voting, because then it feels like then it's just only your perception of who's the best, and you're not really, a person could have a reputation for being good and get voted on even though their skills have declined, or they make a few great plays and you remember those, but overall they're kind of mediocre. So Johnny Peralta was like that for the Detroit Tigers. I think he was in a finalist one year. He didn't win. Just coming to my mind right now, but Johnny Peralta for the Tigers at shortstop was in the Gold Glove finalists. He was slow as could be, but he made the plays that came to him. So if he could get to the ball, he made the play every time. He almost never made an error. I think he had one season, he might have made 0 errors, or maybe made one right at the end of the year. But he was an excellent fielder on balls hit to him. But he really was not a Gold Glover because he couldn't move that far left or right. So a lot of balls got through for base hits that for other fielders they would have gotten to. So that's the kind of thing with your eyes. You might go, oh, yeah, maybe he's pretty good. But by putting the defensive index in there, it lets you know what's going on. So that's my rant about Gold Gloves. And next up, our Blimerick. And this time, it's a tribute to Gold Gloves. So here we go. Be they young or be they old, the best defenders are often bold. With a dive to their right or stealing a homer at night, the gloves they earn are those of gold. So that gets us to the answer to today's trivia question, and I'll repeat the question for you. This year's Arizona Diamondbacks, the 2023 Diamondbacks, are going to the World Series with 84 wins, placing them at just 6 games above 500 for the regular season. What previous World Series winner actually had less wins? Less than 84. And the hint is they were a division winner. They were not a wild card, but they did play during the wild card era. The answer? The 2006 St. Louis Cardinals, who become our blast from the past. So the 2006 Cardinals remarkably won their division that year. This is 2006, with just 83 wins for an extremely mediocre regular season record of 83-79, just 4 games over 500. They won the National League Central that year, which had several teams hovering right around the 500 mark. And then St. Louis won the best of 5 division series over the Padres, and then the NLCS, the championship series, over the Mets in 7 games, which moved them to the World Series. And in the World Series, those Cardinals beat the Detroit Tigers 4-1. The Tigers, by the way, were the American League wild card, but they did have a decent record, winning 95 games. And I get these details from baseballreference.com. Who was on those 2006 St. Louis Cardinals? Names you will have heard of. Catcher Yadier Molina, first base Albert Pujols. Pujols had a terrific year that year. He was 26-year-old at the time, 33 doubles, good, 49 home runs, 119 runs scored, and 137 runs batted in. And he batted .331. This is a guy with power and batting average, batted .331. His OPS plus is 78% better than league average. And his OPS 1.102 is just kind of off the charts. When you get up to 1, that's incredible. And amazingly, he finished second that year in the MVP voting. But terrific year for Pujols. Shortstop, David Eckstein. Third base, Scott Rowland. And the outfield, Jim Edmonds, at least in center field, as a guy you will remember. And they did have an outfielder on their roster, Skip Shoemaker, who goes on to become a major league manager. Quick look at their pitching. Chris Carpenter, 15-8, 3.09 ERA. Jason Marquis, 14 wins, 16 losses. 6.02 ERA. Wow, 33 starts with a 6.02 ERA. That is a lot. 194 innings. That's a lot of innings to give a guy with a 6 ERA, which is probably one of the reasons they just barely finished above 500. Jeff Suppan, 12-7 with a 4.12 ERA. Those are their three big inning guys: Chris Carpenter, Jason Marquis, and Jeff Suppan. They also had Anthony Reyes and Jeff Weaver, who pitched less innings and weren't especially effective. In the bullpen, they had their closer, Jason Isringhausen. He was pretty good with 33 saves, 3.55 ERA, and 8 strikeouts per 9 at that time. Those are some of the key players in that game. Adam Wainwright in the bullpen as well. But I think that the top player from that team by far on that given year really was Albert Pujols. So that is our blast from the past, the 2006 St. Louis Cardinals. And so that's all for today, my friends. Join us next time, because honestly, what can be better than talking baseball? I'm your host, Phil Estruth Harrison. We'll see you next time on My Week in Baseball.